Did the Balrog get what it deserved? In Moria's depths, a terror older than dwarves, elves, or even the mountains awoke, a spirit of fire and shadow. Durin's Bane. How did such darkness endure through ages of myth and ruin? We all remember Gandalf on the bridge, staff raised, voice ringing. You cannot pass. But do we really understand what he was fighting for? Was it just the Fellowship's survival? Or something even the wise could scarcely name? Why would Gandalf, kin to Sauron and the Balrog, risk everything, not for victory, but for something greater? This isn't just the story of a monster slain. It's a reckoning with ancient corruption, a sacrifice echoing far beyond that bridge. Was Durin's Bane truly destroyed, or did its fall open a deeper wound in Middle-earth? Welcome to Middle-earth Unveiled, where we search for the truths hidden in shadow and flame. To understand that battle on the bridge, we must look back, far before dwarves, before sunlight, before Khazad-dûm was even dreamed. In the beginning were the Ainur, mighty spirits, the first of all beings, brought into being by Eru, the One. Among them walked the Maia, Sauron, Gandalf, and the one who would become Durin's Bane. The Maia were lesser spirits, each woven into the world with a unique purpose. Some walked as guides, some fell into shadow. Now, how does a spirit of light become the very heart of fear? The answer lies with Melkor, mightiest of the Ainur, who became Morgoth. In his rebellion, he twisted the Maia into beings of terror and flame, the Balrogs. Once, they marched in force, breaking kingdoms and burning legends into ash. Yet after Morgoth fell, most vanished, fading into nightmare and old stories. But what becomes of immortal evil when its master is gone? Some say the last Balrogs perished. Others believe a few slipped into the deepest shadows, waiting, banked fire, unrepentant. One waited beneath Caradhras. Ages later, dwarves digging for Mithril awoke what should never have been disturbed. That day, Khazad-dûm was broken. The dwarves called the terror they'd awakened Durin's Bane, a shadow that slew their king, sent them into exile, and left even orcs unwilling to remain. For centuries, Moria became a wound in dwarven memory, a place haunted not just by orcs, but by the echo of ancient terror. Among the wise, whispers grew. What sleeps in darkness can always wake. And so, Gandalf and the fate of the Fellowship meet an evil older than memory itself. What was it about the Balrog that could shake even Gandalf's resolve? Balrogs were Maia of the same spiritual order as Sauron and Gandalf. Spirits corrupted by Morgoth's will. Beings not of flesh, but of power and darkness. Tolkien wrote, they were hearts of fire, cloaked in darkness, and terror went before them. They had whips of flame. At their height, they marched as Morgoth's enforcers, wrath given form. Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, broke the lines at Gondolin's fall, ending hope for elven kingdoms. This was no mere beast of flame and shadow. This was divinity corrupted, angelic power twisted to terrible purpose. When Khazad-dûm's dwarves delved too greedily and too deep, they didn't merely wake a monster, they unearthed living memory of the world's first war, a being that once stood in Ilúvatar's presence before choosing darkness. But if Balrogs could be destroyed, what made this one survive? By the Third Age, only one Balrog remained, a shadow that haunted both memory and legend. Durin's Bane was more than a relic of old wars. It was a living reminder of the world's first great rebellion. When it rose, the wise understood the danger at once. This was not just a contest of strength, it was proof that ancient evil, no matter how long buried, can always return with full fury. For dwarves, the Balrog meant not just loss, but shame, reminder that greatness could topple with one misjudged step, that even deepest roots could poison with ancient sins. For elves, it wore the face of terror that broke Beleriand and stole light from their brightest heroes. But the full horror of what the dwarves had awakened was only beginning to unfold. Before darkness returned, Khazad-dûm stood as the greatest of all dwarven realms, its halls rich with gold, mithril, and legend. The dwarves delved deep, guided by craft, tradition, and hope. In their songs, the founding of Khazad-dûm was like the world's creation, a story sung in praise and pride. But their quest unearthed what they could not name. We delved too deep and woke the ancient wrath, their songs would mourn. For them, it was not the Balrog, that was elvish, but the nameless terror, shadow in the roots, end of all they'd built. King Durin VI fell, and the dwarven heart went into exile. The irony cuts deeper when we consider Aula, who made the dwarves. This same Vala once served alongside the Maia, who would become Balrogs. The very father of dwarven kind had walked with these beings before their fall. Now his children had awakened one from slumber, bringing full circle a tragedy that began before Arda's shaping. Elven memory ran longer still. To Legolas, Moria's fear was more than superstition. He recalled old stories. Hosts of fire moving through shadow, Gondolin's fall, heroes burned to ash by whips of flame. Even Galadriel, wise and powerful, knew to respect what dwelt beneath mountains. She had glimpsed times when Balrog stalked the world openly, shaping fate. In Moria, fear was not instinct, it was echo of old catastrophes. But would fear alone halt the coming darkness? Now, the Fellowship runs through ruined halls, pursued by orcs. At the bridge, Gandalf, who had faced ringwraiths, trolls, and worse, felt dread he could not name. The Balrog's arrival wasn't just heat and flame, it was despair itself. Its presence alone made Legolas cry out, Gimli falter, even Boromir hesitate. "You cannot pass," Gandalf declared, not from certainty of victory, but because someone had to stand. Earlier he had tried to bar the Balrog's way. I have never felt such challenge. The counterspell was terrible. It nearly broke me. On that bridge, two beings of the same origin faced each other across an abyss of choice. Both were Maia, spirits of the same kind, yet one had chosen service, the other domination. The Balrog's power bent toward destruction, Gandalf's toward protection. Here was Tolkien's central conflict distilled, the choice between power seized and power surrendered. No mere beast, the Balrog was a being whose heart was of fire, but cloaked in darkness, and terror went before it, with a whip of flame in its hand. On the bridge, fire and shadow twined together, seeming to devour light itself. What happened next would reshape Middle-earth's fate, and one wizard's very soul. For a heartbeat, angel and demon, both Maia, stood as equals. Then the bridge fell, but their war was far from over. What happened after they plunged into darkness? Gandalf would only say, "We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him, till at last he fled into dark tunnels. Far, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report to darken the light of day." These sparse words hide an epic beyond telling. Battle that began in darkness and moved through the world's deepest places. Consider the suffering. 10 days of combat without rest, without light, without hope of rescue. What thoughts passed through Gandalf's mind in those endless hours? Did he remember the music of the Ainur, when he and his adversary were both created from the same divine thought. For 10 days, Gandalf and the Balrog battled through black water, stone, and ice, until, at Xiraxagil's peak, their war ended beneath stars. Gandalf threw down my enemy, and he fell, and the mountainside smote him in his ruin. But Gandalf too perished. The world mourned twice. Darkness was gone, but so was the Grey Wizard. The Fellowship and Middle-earth itself faced the question, was this victory, or only the loss of both light and shadow? But the answer, and its meaning for every soul in Middle-earth, would echo beyond death itself. To truly understand the Balrog's fate, we must attempt the impossible, to see through eyes of fire and shadow. What drove this Maia to follow Morgoth? Perhaps the same temptation that corrupted Sauron, desire for mastery, for power unchecked by compassion or wisdom. As Tolkien wrote, the enemy in successive forms is always naturally concerned with sheer domination. The Balrog was not born evil. Like all Maia, it began as a being of light and purpose. Its fall was choice, repeated countless times across ages. There is profound tragedy in this corruption. Think what the Balrog once was, a spirit of light, perhaps aligned with Aula like many who fell with Morgoth. It once joined the music that shaped the world, adding its voice to the great harmony. That same voice became a roar of flame and terror, discord in the song meant to be beautiful. In the depths beneath Moria, the Balrog must have nursed ancient grudges. Its kin were defeated, its master cast into void. It survived through cunning and retreat, hiding when others fought and fell. For untold years, it dwelt in darkness, becoming more shadow than flame. Its power turned inward, festering. When the dwarves woke it, perhaps it saw not just prey, but vindication, chance to reclaim purpose through terror, to remind the world that Morgoth's shadows could never truly vanish. But pride, the first sin of the Ainur, would be its undoing. What would it take to break such ancient pride? And why did only Gandalf succeed? Why did the Balrog fall? Not to might, but to Gandalf's self-offering. The Balrog's end closed the circle of rebellion that began with Morgoth. Once, the Balrog fell from pride. Now, Gandalf undid that pride by giving his life for others. Tolkien believed evil is ultimately undone, not by greater force, but by sacrifice. Gandalf's death is what Tolkien called eucatastrophe, the sudden turn to hope. The Fellowship survived, the quest endured, and Gandalf returned, renewed, greater than before. This is the profound reversal at Tolkien's heart. Power freely surrendered is ultimately stronger than power jealously hoarded. The Balrog, in all its ancient might, could not comprehend a being willingly laying down life for others. It understood force, domination, fear, but not sacrifice. And so it found itself undone by power it had long forgotten. Durin's Bane received its doom not in vengeance, but in the humility and courage it could never comprehend. But what if Gandalf had failed? Imagine a world where Durin's Bane walked free once more, where Sauron gained an ally from the ancient world, and First Age fires rose again. Gandalf's sacrifice saved not just the Fellowship, but the world itself from its oldest fear. So, did the Balrog get what he deserved? Not in the usual sense, where stories mete out justice as balance of power, simple equation of crime and retribution. Durin's Bane was never just a beast to be bested. It was, and remains, the last living shadow of Morgoth's pride, lingering reminder that ancient wounds do not simply vanish, but echo across ages. The Balrog's fall is not clean ending, but reckoning, collision with the past that refuses to stay buried, confrontation with the deepest currents of corruption and fear running through Middle-earth's heart. The very concept of deserving shifts when we consider beings of such power and age. What justice could possibly address Gondolin's burning, King Durin's sixth slaying, or the corruption of a spirit created for light? Here, Tolkien moves beyond simple retribution into something more profound, restoration of cosmic order, where evil ultimately undoes itself through its own nature. To say Gandalf won is to misunderstand his struggle's true nature. His was not triumph of might over might, but sacrifice over self. In a world where so many seek conquest through force, Gandalf's victory lies in surrender, willingness to bear loss, to lay down life so others might pass through darkness. Here, Tolkien's legendarium becomes living parable. Evil is not vanquished by greater display of strength, but by the slow, costly work of relinquishing control, by humility to accept vulnerability and endure suffering for something beyond the self. Perhaps this is Middle-earth's quiet logic, and life's, understanding that our greatest victories are seldom marked by banners and acclaim, but by unseen, unheralded acts of courage that refuse domination's easy path. Every true reckoning is act of remembrance. Return to the source of what was broken, and offering that heals not by erasing the scar, but by transfiguring its meaning. Gandalf the White, transformed through sacrifice, radiating light not as weapon, but as healing. So the question the story leaves us is not whether the Balrog deserved its end, but whether we too will have courage to confront the ancient shadows within our own stories. What, in our own lives, remains lurking in the deep places, waiting for light and honest reckoning? The path forward, Tolkien suggests, is not to fight darkness with more darkness, but to meet it with patience, resolve, and the radical strength to let go. In the final account, the Balrog's defeat is less vengeance than solemn reminder. Some evils are not defeated. They are absorbed, understood, and overcome by hope's steady work. Gandalf's sacrifice becomes a turning of the world, eucatastrophe born not of conquest, but compassion. And in this, Middle-earth's wisdom becomes our own, courage to stand, to sacrifice, and to heal what once seemed unhealable. What did the Balrog's fall mean for Middle-earth and for us? Gandalf's sacrifice marks the turning of an age. The last Balrog's death signals that Morgoth's ancient shadows can be defeated, though never easily. Victory at Khazad-dûm's bridge resonates throughout the entire legendarium. It stands as proof that the distant evils of the First Age, beings that once marched in Angban's hosts, could still be overcome in the Third Age's waning years. If the Balrog, Morgoth's own lieutenant, could fall, then perhaps even Sauron was not beyond defeat. Tolkien wrote, "Evil is, in the Lord of the Rings, not absolute and can be defeated, though always at cost." Gandalf's death and return as the White Wizard foretold the final hope for the West. Sauron would not fall to brute force, but to endurance, sacrifice, and the faith of the humble. This victory resonates beyond fantasy into lived experience. The ancient pattern, corruption through pride, redemption through sacrifice, speaks to the deepest truths of human experience. It reminds us that power is not an end, but a means, and that how we wield our strength matters more than its measure. When Moria's fires fade, what remains is not darkness, but memory of light. Durin's Bane, once a spirit of flame, is now only legend, warning, and promise. The significance extends to Moria itself. After the War of the Ring, Durin the Seven would one day return to Khazad-dûm and restore it to glory. The shadow's end allows for renewal. What was lost can be reclaimed, not through vengeance but through courage and hope. What ancient fears or hidden prides haunt our own hearts? The reckoning may be terrible, but it is also a beginning. This is Tolkien's enduring message, that evil, however ancient, however powerful, contains the seeds of its own undoing. The Balrog fell not because Gandalf was stronger, but because sacrifice is ultimately more powerful than self-preservation. This is the truth that Morgoth and all his servants could never comprehend, that in giving ourselves away, we become more than we could ever be in hoarding power. In the end, the Balrog got what he deserved. Not the triumph of terror, but the end of a world ruled by fear.